Charles Manson. A name that still echoes through American history as one of its darkest symbols of manipulation, violence, and cultural collapse. Born on November 12, 1934, in Cincinnati, Ohio, Manson's life began in chaos. His mother, Kathleen Maddox, was only 16 years old, unstable, and often absent. His father abandoned him before birth. From the start, Manson grew up neglected and unwanted. He spent much of his childhood bouncing between relatives, foster homes, and reform schools. By 9 years old, he was already stealing cars, skipping school, and getting arrested. When his mother went to prison for armed robbery, Manson was left adrift, a child raised more by institutions than family. Manson's early years behind bars shaped him into a manipulator. He learned to survive through charm, intimidation, and deceit. Psychologists who evaluated him described him as antisocial, narcissistic, and incapable of forming healthy relationships. One report called him markedly schizoid, unable to trust or connect with others. Prison became a revolving door. He was released, reoffended, and locked up again. Ironically, when he was finally paroled in 1967, Manson told authorities he didn't want to leave. He feared the outside world. Yet once free, he found himself in San Francisco during the Summer of Love, an era of drugs, music, and free-spirited youth. It was here that Manson discovered his greatest weapon, his charisma. With a guitar in his hands and LSD on his tongue, he lured vulnerable young people, mostly women, into his orbit. He preached a philosophy that mixed bits of Scientology, the Bible, and the Beatles, weaving them into a vision of an apocalyptic race war he called Helter Skelter. To his followers, Manson wasn't just a man. He was a prophet. He convinced them that when society collapsed, the family, as they called themselves, would emerge as rulers of a new world. By 1968, Manson and his family had moved into Spahn Ranch, an old, crumbling movie set outside Los Angeles. It was there that he solidified his control, using drugs, sex, and fear to break down individual identities. He told his followers to abandon their families, to see him as the center of their universe. His charisma was magnetic but dangerous, and by 1969, his teachings turned deadly. The first victim was Gary Hinman, a music teacher and acquaintance of the family. In July 1969, Manson sent his followers to Hinman's home to extort money. Over several days, Hinman was tortured and eventually murdered, his blood used to write "Political Piggy" on the wall. Manson himself slashed Hinman's face with a sword before ordering the final blow. It was a prelude to the carnage that followed. On August 9, 1969, Manson instructed 4 of his most loyal followers, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian, to drive to 10050 Cielo Drive in Benedict Canyon. The house had once been rented by music producer Terry Melcher, who had rejected Manson's musical ambitions. But that night, actress Sharon Tate, 8.5 months pregnant, was home with her friends Abigail Folger, Wojciech Frykowski, Jay Sebring, and a young visitor, Stephen Parent. The family invaded the property, and what followed was one of the most gruesome nights in Hollywood history. Tate was stabbed 16 times as she begged for the life of her unborn child. Sebring was shot and stabbed. Folger was chased into the yard and killed. Frykowski fought back but was shot, bludgeoned, and stabbed over 50 times. Parent, the youngest at 18, was shot in his car as he tried to flee. The word "pig" was scrawled on the door in Tate's blood. The next night, Manson personally joined his followers in selecting a new target, the LaBianca home in Los Feliz. Leno and Rosemary LaBianca, a wealthy couple, were tied up by Manson, who then left his followers to do the killing. Leno was stabbed with a bayonet, the word "war" carved into his abdomen, while Rosemary was stabbed over 40 times. Words like "Helter Skelter," spelled incorrectly, were smeared in blood on the walls. The murders sent Los Angeles into a state of terror. Wealthy residents hired bodyguards, installed alarm systems, and carried guns. At first, police failed to connect the crimes. It wasn't until family member Susan Atkins bragged about her role in jail that investigators pieced it together. Another follower, Linda Kasabian, agreed to testify in exchange for immunity, becoming the key witness. In October 1969, Manson and his family were arrested after a raid on their Death Valley hideout. The trial that followed in 1970 was a spectacle unlike any other. Manson carved a swastika into his forehead. His female followers sang in unison outside the courthouse and mimicked his gestures inside. Prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi argued that Manson's goal had been to ignite his helter-skelter prophecy, a race war he believed would destroy society. The defense was chaotic, with Manson often shouting, threatening the judge, or delivering cryptic monologues. Despite never killing anyone himself, Manson was convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. In 1971, he and 3 followers were sentenced to death, though their sentences were later commuted to life in prison after California abolished the death penalty. In prison, Manson became an enduring figure of infamy. He continued to give bizarre interviews, declaring things like, "I am the devil, and the devil always has a face." He produced unsettling artwork, wrote cryptic letters, and even recorded music. He remained manipulative, violent, and unrepentant. At parole hearings, he ranted about being above the law and showed no remorse for the lives destroyed. On November 19, 2017, Charles Manson died in a California hospital at the age of 83, from cardiac arrest and complications of colon cancer. But death did not end his legacy. If anything, it cemented him as one of the most infamous criminals in modern history. His name has become shorthand for cult violence, manipulation, and the dark side of charisma. The crimes he orchestrated marked the symbolic end of the 1960s, shattering the illusion of peace and love and replacing it with fear and cynicism. For the families of the victims, the pain never ended. Doris Tate, Sharon's mother, became a pioneer in the victims' rights movement, fighting tirelessly against parole for the family members and ensuring victims had a voice in court. Her daughters carried on her work after her death. The scars left by Manson's actions extended far beyond the immediate victims, reshaping American culture, politics, and even law enforcement approaches to cults and conspiracy crimes. Charles Manson never pulled the trigger. He never wielded the knife in those notorious murders. But through psychological domination, he turned others into instruments of his madness. He remains a cautionary tale of how charisma and manipulation, unchecked, can unleash terror, and how one man's darkness can alter the course of a nation's history.